you're at a dinner party or a networking event or a cocktail party, and you meet somebody new.
Good on you, mate. Well done.
Or you meet your partner's parents for the very first time. Inevitably, you get asked the question, so, what is it you do? For better or worse, what we do has become who we are. What we studied, the academic degree to our name, the title on our business card, the company we work for. These become the markers by which others identify us. What we do, unfortunately, has become the coded language for how we're perceived to be competent or not, where we fit in socially, and ultimately how much money we make. Our brains are wired to think in categories. Thinking in categories helps our brain deal with information overload, but also put order to our surroundings. So when we categorize each other by what we do, doctor, programmer, professor, student, writer, entrepreneur, it helps shape how we see each other. The title doctor, it isn't a description of us. It's a judgment of us. The title doctor doesn't describe you. It positions you. It positions you within a hierarchy and within a set of accepted societal norms. We don't know if you set out to be a doctor to follow your passion, whether you were forced by a parent, or whether you're following a family tradition. We don't know if you like being a doctor. We don't know if you're any good at it. But we believe that because you're a doctor, you're trustworthy and intelligent and hardworking and competent, perhaps well paid. Identity and judgment, they're two sides of the same coin. There was an American poll that looked at what are the 5 most respected professions: doctors, scientists, firefighters, military officers, and engineers. The 5 least trusted professions. You ready for the list? Lobbyists, business executives. I take note to that one. Lawyers. Okay, that one I don't argue with. Television journalists, and local politicians. I have to say I was a little bit surprised to figure out that I've now spent my entire career in the second least trusted profession, but perhaps even more miffed to figure out that politicians are considered more trustworthy. The sense of who we respect and who we distrust, it's a factor of many things. How they're depicted in the media, in fiction, our own experiences. If a handful of executives, Enron executives, are found to be criminal, does it mean that we all are? If a successful, accomplished athlete, like Lance Armstrong, takes enhancement drugs, does it mean that all athletes do? See, our brains are also wired for survival. So negative news actually travels and takes a much bigger space. It has bigger impact in our brains than positive news. Negative news travels differently and gets classified in the part of our brain called the hippocampus. I actually think that Rick Hansen, a psychologist, best described it. He said, negative news, it's like Velcro. Whereas positive news or neutral news, it's like Teflon. It takes 3 to 5 positive experiences to offset a negative one. And as you and I know, trust, it's hard to give, hard to earn, but boy, is it ever so easy to lose. For 20 years, I worked for a company called Procter & Gamble. Each of us has at least one of their products in our home. For many people, my business card was who I was. It was who I was to me as well. And then I worked for Coca-Cola. Everybody knows Coke. There's only 2 countries in the world the brand isn't sold directly, Cuba and North Korea, and even in those countries, the consumers know the brand. Once again, my identity was tied to the company. I was Anya from Coca-Cola. And then I wasn't. I left the corporate world, and for the first time in 26 years, the only name on my business card was my own. Who was I? To the world? Who was I to myself? What happens when you no longer have that business card to show that says you're an executive for a big corporation? When that identity is gone. But it's not just later in our careers. I was talking with a friend of mine, and I was telling him that I was going to leave Coca-Cola, and he said to me, Anya, be careful. 90% of people, they're going to forget about you. They're going to stop associating with you. And I said to him, are you going to be part of the 90 or the 10? There was truth in what he had to say. You drop off the invite list for conferences and social gatherings. And your phone doesn't ring as much anymore with people wanting to keep in touch just in case there's a business opportunity that might arise between the 2 of you. And there is an uncomfortableness when you get together with people and they want to talk about work, but you're no longer in the know. The outside world, they rebrand you. You become former. You start being introduced as the former general manager of Coca-Cola. But that tussle with identity and judgment, it doesn't just happen later in our careers. It's from the get-go. When we're young and we still don't have the experience and the track record and the logos and the titles to our name. There's a stigma attached to us when we're young and we're asked the question, so what is it you do? When our confidence is still fragile then. I was with a group of millennials recently and we were having a conversation. And they asked me, so when's the right time to leave the corporate world? What they were really asking me is, in today's day and age, which is the better world to be in? Is it the corporate world or is it the startup world? There's no question that the startup world, it's the sexier one to be in these days. Lots of media hype, everybody chasing to become the next Facebook or Google or Elon Musk. But we also need to remember that 9 out of 10 startups, they actually never start. Or said differently, they fail quickly. Which world is better? One world isn't better than the other world. And yet, those in one world judge those in the other. See, for millennials today, there's this social convention, this kind of judgment that their careers should be tied to the startup world. That's where it's hip and happening. As the conversation continued with these women, there was a sense of relief as they realized that they could defy that convention and happily stay connected to the corporate world. I had a job interview several months ago, and the interviewer, he looks at my CV and he says, So I see your last role was a year ago. What have you been doing with all this time? His delivery wrapped in judgment. What he was really asking me is, why haven't you found work yet? You see, we learn to live in a world of judgment. When we judge others, we are simply protecting ourselves. We allow ourselves to stay on the surface rather than connect with people at a deeper level, at a level that would cause us to perhaps reflect back on who it is we are. When we judge others, we protect our self-confidence. That interviewer, he could have asked me, so what has this year given you? But that may have caused him to reflect back on, what has the year given him? What had he learned? What had he experienced? Particularly, in his case, having worked for the same company for the last 35 years. Instead, he chose to probe for weakness in me. Was his year of continuity any better than my year of change? What I had done with that year is explored new frontiers, including entrepreneurship, investing in and co-founding this innovative venture in the medical sector, and contributing back to the community by mentoring scores of young leaders and investing in my own well-being. You see, to me, these all seemed like accomplishments. But to him, they were just excuses. It takes courage to change your career. My favorite story is of Isabel. We call her Iz. Iz graduated with a psychology degree, but she worked in a job outside of, or she worked in a profession outside of her degree. She worked for a technical software company owned by friends. Over the course of about 15 years, she grew up through the company and became the manager of the technical writing department. She was outstanding at what she did, highly valued by the managers, and highly appreciated by her own staff. But she herself was feeling unfulfilled. So she quit. She took some time to reflect and explore. 20 years earlier, she had wanted to go to veterinary school, but she didn't have the grades to get in. So she ended up with that psychology degree. Was it possible to try again in her 40s? She decided to give it a go. She went back to university for 2 years and upgraded the courses she needed and the marks she needed to be able to apply. She got accepted into one of 4 veterinary schools in Canada, and 4 years after that, graduated. Dr. Iz started her first job as a veterinarian at the age of 47. I love sharing my sister's story. I find it so inspirational. It's our character. It's what drives us. It's our passions. That's what defines who we are, not our job titles, not our professions. They say that today, 80% of us aren't even engaged in the workforce. So what utility is there in defining each other by what it is we do for a living? You know, I actually think millennials and Gen Zs, they're onto something here. They are looking for innovative solutions to close the gap between work and passion. They are reshaping the workplace. They are demanding that employers look for a cause and deliver a cause that's greater than just producing profits. They're pushing for purpose and profits, and they don't accept that the two are mutually exclusive. Whether it's supply chains free of child trafficking, or whether it's staff sabbatical programs that allow you to give back to the community. These are the kinds of initiatives that are creating a meaningful workplace. And if employers don't adapt, they risk losing them. LinkedIn today says that millennials will have an average of 4 jobs within the first decade of leaving school. X's, we had 2. Those graduating today, they're going to have an average of 15 different jobs, and many of those in completely different areas. So what will their identities be tied to? You see, we have to break the habit. We have to break through this paradigm of judging ourselves and each other by what it is we do. We have to increase our own self-awareness. We need to look at who it is we are. And in doing so, in defining that, we will be seen by who it is we are and not just what it is we do. And in doing so, we will become less judgmental of others. Maybe we'll become less judgmental simply because it's going to be hard to judge. There won't be these one-word versions of who we are anymore. Manager and waitress and technician and CEO. Maybe our one word will be tied to our passions, our character, our values. It's like in the book, Eat, Love, Pray. In the scene where Elizabeth is at the table with some friends, and a friend confronts her with the question, Liz, what's your word? And she reflects, and she answers, she says, well, I guess my word is writer. And another friend responds, and she says, yeah, but that's what you do. That's not who you are. And Liz thinks a little bit more, and she responds, and she says, I guess I'm a woman in search of a word. Had that interviewer asked me, so what has the last year given you? I would have said to him that it had been a year of hard work. A year that allowed me to understand what was important to me, to see what life had taught me to date and what values I wanted to take forward with me. A year that introduced me to scores of new people and new ways of doing business, things that I would have never been exposed to had I stayed in the comforts of my corporate world. A year that taught me that my business card with my name alone on it does have meaning. A year that increased my own self-awareness and decreased my judgment of others. And my word, impact. Knowing that I work in the second least trusted profession makes me all that more determined to want to show that there is a different way, that what we do and what we achieve, yes, it's important, but how we do it and how we achieve it, that is what makes the ultimate difference. So, next time you're at a dinner party, you're at a networking event or a cocktail party, and you meet somebody new, lead the conversation. But rather than ask them, so what is it you do for a living? Ask them what they're passionate about. Ask them what drives them. Ask them something that will help you understand who they really are. Thank you.